Today, we're going to be looking at the changes that are coming in Unraid as they are moving and transitioning new users in the future, the near future here, from a pay once lifetime update model to a subscription based model that is kind of a hybrid. It's more of an enterprise with support kind of model, in my opinion, than a pure subscription model. We're going to talk about the differences between these things. I am interested in what you're thinking, so drop those in the comments below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content also. And we're going to get some links in there in the description area so that you can get a link to the video that was recently done on the Uncast show. And that, of course, being hosted by Space Invader 1, and excellent content interview with the founder and his daughter, who is the COO kind of operations manager of Unraid. And we're going to talk about some of my historic license purchases. We're going to do some really shoddy math just to see why this might be necessary from a finance standpoint. And at the end, this is the part you're definitely going to want to stick around for. I'm going to talk about what I think the risks are here, because I do think there is actually some pretty big risks here associated with this. So, of course, you're going to have Reddit. I highlighted something here. You're on Reddit. Pitchforks and torches are always ready. Reddit's reaction to this has been pretty bad. Why? Because it was discovered in the code base, some stubs that were being utilized in preparation for this change coming up. That was poorly received because, of course, people would expect for an announcement. Now, they have put out an announcement. They've talked about this. They've done a podcast. There's a lot more information out now than there was just, when it was pure speculation. People were wondering, are they going to get Adobe'd here? And it is not the same. It is not a SaaS product. So that is one thing to keep in mind. So they have put out a blog post. It is a lightweight blog post. There do need to be significantly more details put out around this and then be concrete as far as what is going to be changing. There are some major changes. There are some really good points here, and there are some points that are very salient that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with themselves. Now, if you look, they are committed to grandfathering all the basic, Plus, and Pro license holders in. So if you have an existing license, you are grandfathered in. I would recommend you associate that license with an Unraid.net account so you don't have a management of USB problem in the future. Now, in the cast that was done, they did talk about a coming feature, some things in 7 that we should be expecting in version 7 of Unraid that I think are very exciting. And I look forward to continuing my Unraid experience. Been a user for a very long time. I looked back, and it looks like 2016 is the first time I purchased a license here. And I've actually purchased, I think, 3 licenses, 2 on one account and another on a different email account. And like I mentioned, it's good to associate your licenses with an Unraid.net account so that you can manage them more easily. I need to actually do that. I've actually got one of these USB drives somewhere. I don't know how it turned into this, but I've got Unraid USB drives everywhere, and I'm like, don't overwrite that one. I think everybody else probably experiences the same. Let me know if you do as well. But you are being grandfathered in. That means all future updates will be honored. Not going to be pulling one of these things where they're like, hey, we've got a new feature, and we're going to call it Unraid 2.0, which was something I was very concerned about. Of course, we can see the administrators here account on their forums talking about this explicitly. And they talk about that. We're not going to play any games like coming up with new Unraid OS, where all of a sudden your key won't work and we start charging an extra fee to keep using it. That is very good to see, because that is actually something I've seen with quite a few different software companies. Of course, one of the core tenets of Unraid is keeping your data local to you. That is going to remain something that happens. They're not changing this to a SaaS platform itself. Your use of the trial key does phone home. However, all the other keys do not. So that is one thing that I've always appreciated about Unraid, especially because it is your data, and your data sovereignty is important to people that are using Unraid. if you think about the user persona of people using Unraid, let's talk about that for a second. Who is your average user? You are most likely your average user. I am a user, and we are people that download Linux ISOs off the internet to back them up for perpetuity. Checking out season 9 of Debian, his, kind of where I think I started archiving most of my Debian ISOs. I'm sure, let me know what ISOs you guys are on. Season 8 of CentOS has been just an absolute bummer. I gotta say that. Definitely did not look forward to what's happened in season 8 of CentOS. But we are a different kind of person, a different kind of persona. And the desire to have your own data on your own servers is something that is unique, that Unraid has made very simple. As a matter of fact, definitely catch, if you are interested in the history of Unraid, the excellent podcast that linked down here below. Really good, gives a lot of the backstory about the startup of Unraid, the history, the programming behind it, and how it was really built as a utility for archiving, just like we all do, ISOs, Linux ISOs that you've ripped off of CDs that you burned from the internet. So you can see here what is being planned is a change to the licensing structure for 2 different products that will be offered as subscriptions that will be essentially at what kind of is, but not really is, the starter packages. So if you see here, we've got starter, supports 4 attached storage devices. This will be offered at a lower price than today's basic key. Let's take a look at the price of Unraid's basic key. So $59. However, that $59 gets you up to 6 attached storage devices. Now, that's an important distinction that you might be interested in exploring, because that is a lower price, but also it's going to have less attached devices. Now, for a lot of people, and with a lot of the high capacity drives that you've got today, let me say that you're probably okay with 4 attached devices if you're running 22 terabyte SATA drives like we've sold on shop.digitalspaceport.com a lot of times in the past. That is something that actually does work for a lot of people. And I mean, if you have essentially a one parity situation there, one of the nice things, of course, about Unraid is if your parity drive were to fail, you still have the data. And if one of your data disks fails, the other disks still work and you can replace it with the parity. Not exactly a RAID 5 or a RAID 6, but you can kind of draw your own analogies. The cool thing about it, and some of the background that was talked about, is the differences between it. When he started working on these things, and the approach that he took was really more about accessing drive data to get a certain speed class in historical context that has now become an evolution of that into more higher performance for people to utilize things like Docker-based apps, virtual machines, and a higher speed access of their data. All really interesting topics. Definitely make sure to check that out. 4 devices and 6 devices. That is a big change. However, less price. So if we just make an assumption, and I'm going to make some assumptions here because I'm just going to shoot from the hip. It doesn't hurt to throw these things out. We can see they're basically $60 for 6 devices. So for 4 devices, I'm going to guess that they're going to be $39. Now, they did say in the Uncast interview that it would be 50% for your annual renewal fee. So let's just assume $39. Okay, so you're at $39 for your license, and you are going to get a recurring fee of $19. Let's just say that is going to be just some shotgun math, totally speculation. I have no knowledge of this. I have no contact with anybody at Unraid about this. I actually like doing things that way sometimes because it gives me a lot of freedom to talk about what I want without being ensconced in what somebody wants me to say. And that allows me to represent you, who is a user of a product, better than a company, which is not who I really represent on this channel. And if you like that, make sure that you hit that subscribe and ring that bell below. But let's just shoot from the hip and say that it's going to be that price. So for 4 discs, after your first year of renewals, And they did say that this is going to be a ongoing product you can continue to use. So let's say you have got the basic license or the starter, it'll be called the starter. Let's say you've got that. Now, when you go back to your starter license, it's going to continue to work at the level that it was into the future. One of the biggest talking points has been, what is the upgrade? When do you upgrade? Will they provide security, especially since this is a server OS software, for you in the event that you don't upgrade? They did say, and I'm not sure, but they did say security is not going to be necessarily provided. You're going to need to upgrade to have your security. Let me just be the first to say, as somebody who has run quite a few servers, I think that is a very good idea if you are considering that, to go ahead and upgrade. However, if we look at just $40 or $39 and then that first year's subscription renewal, I think that if you are on the fence or you are thinking, there's some good advice here. You can still buy the basic. If you are on a trial, you are going to be able to do this. If you have a basic, a plus, or a pro, you will be able to maintain jumping between those levels into the future. So that's great if you have an existing license. I'm not really the kind of person that says good for me, bad for everybody else, but it's still good for me. I mean, at the end of the day, life is a lot like that, but I do care about other people's experience out there. So I would recommend, if you are looking at Unraid, to consider that. Now, there are alternatives out there, like Open Media Vault probably is one of the closer ones, and I need to do some more videos on that. I haven't actually produced a video on that. I just started using it recently. It's good. It's not Unraid good, but it's good. Now, I think what we're seeing also is the cost of things that are expensive, like ZFS being integrated into Unraid, and them needing to hire professional ZFS people for things like support, because ZFS comes with a lot of specific use cases it's great for. There's certain things it might not be quite so good for. So there is a lot surrounding ZFS itself that is important. But definitely keep in mind, they are saying if you lapse, they're not going to backdate the update fee. So that's actually pretty good, because if you were on a basic, and like, if you think about this, this is really people on the starter license. That's beneficial, because you might get on the starter license. You've got all the cool functionality of being able to have a really fast cache pool, maybe a couple of really high capacity drives. You're okay. You've got your apps. You might let that lapse. You might let that lapse for even a year or two. Who knows? But you might let that lapse for a considerable amount of time until some new feature comes out, or there is a critical security bug and you have your actual server connected to the internet. If you do have your server connected to the internet, you definitely want to think about those things. If you have it kind of isolated away, firewalled off so that you can only access it from an internal, say like VLAN or something like that, then you have very high security even in the event that you go out of date. And then you could, 2 years down the road, pay the update fee. Now, if there are changes to update fees in the future, or the price structure surrounding what it costs, we are in a time where there is pretty, everywhere you look, rising prices. That should be something that you factor in. That's why I think if you are on the fence or you are thinking about it today, decent advice is to go ahead and get at least your basic license bought. That gives you the ability to do whatever you would like with your license, go up to Plus or Pro in the future. 12 devices. Of course, you're getting into a much more serious storage arrangement, multiple keys. You've got something like this going on back here. Crazy amounts of data, crazy amounts of storage. And you probably are getting really, really into things. Things kind of balloon. It's funny, isn't it? Things kind of like all of a sudden you got 3 racks. Who would have thought? But you could be at a 12 attached device limit, and that's a really good like server if you think about it. You can have a lot of flash attached to that, or you can go pro, and then you get your unlimited attached devices. You can create however many pools you want. The sky's the limit. Let's go over the next change. Unleashed. This is a big one because there's no middle step here. You're at 4 attached devices or unlimited attached devices. pick your poison. 4 is kind of low. Let me say that. I think 4 is going to be pretty low for most people. I am just guessing that my price is somewhere in the ballpark or realm of reality. So that first renewal, you're almost at what you would be at for buying a basic license at current price. So that's why I think it is a good idea. Plus you also get those 2 extra devices. And I think that's good for most users. I think a basic license for a bunch of people is probably going to be adequate. Unlimited. Unlimited is going to be, I guess, unleashed. They're renaming it also at the same time. Unlimited devices offered at about the same price as today's Plus Key. So let's take a check on the Plus Key, $89. So that's roughly $90. At 50% renewal, that's $45. So again, if you're on the fence about making any of these jumps and you are thinking of sticking in the ecosystem, do it. Get your key now. Even if you get the basic, you can still do your jumps and go up, incrementally. However, that is unlimited devices. That is recurring revenue for them. And this applies to new users. Let me just say again, new users, grandfathered in old users. And I think they would actually run into probably legal problems if they didn't do that, because they sold this as a upgrade for lifetime. So, I mean, they would have issues if they didn't honor that. And so they are doing the right thing by honoring that. Now, that doesn't speak to what happens in the future, and the future is an unknown. And certainly you should not take any of what I'm saying as any sort of legal advice or anything like that. This is just my thoughts on what's going on here. Lifetime, essentially the same as the Pro Key is today, but at a higher price. So this is definitely a prices are going up and the number of attached devices is going down, and there is no middle ground for most people. So if you are looking for a pro license, then definitely that's something to consider. Another thing to consider, you can pre-buy a license as long as you've got your USB and you're good. So that is hopefully something in the future that we see the reliance on USBs not be. There's only one gripe I really have, and that is the reliance on USBs. I would really like to see there not be a reliance on USBs. I think that would be a little bit more modern, and I hope to see that coming very soon. Hopefully in the 7 update, we'll get that one as well. They did mention that in the Uncast interview. If you're looking at upgrading to a pro license and you're on one of the other licenses, there does not necessarily have to be a rush to get there, because you will be able to upgrade just at the same rates and stuff like that. So that is good information for you out there. However, if you don't have a key and you're on the fence, now is definitely a time to consider getting that key. I think another thing that is critical here is this does not apply to current license holders. Keep that in mind. Most of the bad reactions that happened were before they released information. And there was, there's still people like this. I had to actually edit out some of these things so that it would be a little bit more sanitary for public consumption. But I mean, everybody is fed up with subscription models. Nobody likes it. So I'm going to take this moment to transition into talking what I think is a risk here. And that is, I think there is a lot of people that are going to have a negative reaction to seeing initially a subscription. I think there'll be a lot of hesitancy to that. I know certainly, let's take a look here at something that I think is historically, one of my first or my first license. I still don't, I'm not exactly 100% sure about which license is where, but I did track down a old one and a much more recent one. We can see this is 2016. I'm going to make an assumption. They're using the same invoicing system, and they're on 19014 here as far as the invoice that had been issued to me. So let's say 19,013 had been sold before me. I don't know if this includes trials. I don't know what the stratum of breakdowns between the different classifications are. I don't know if there's a new one of these issued each time you upgrade. I actually think that there is a new one of these issued each time you upgrade. So that should factor into what we're going to look at next. So that was 2016. We're going to flash forward 6 years ish. No, I'm sorry. We're going to flash forward like almost 8 years. So 1,120,665 is where they're now at. So that is roughly a difference of 1.1 million licenses, we should assume. That's a lot, right? But is it? No, it's not. It's not enough. Now, this is looking up to 2022. Certainly, there was a lot of changes that happened around this time. We are seeing Black Friday sales and events and stuff, like where there's discounted keys. I don't know if that continues. I think that's a great idea for them to continue those kind of incentivization things. They're going to need to draw in new users. Somehow you have to draw in those new users still. That part of the equation doesn't change. They had huge word of mouth. That's one of the biggest things that I think is a risk here, is losing some of that word of mouth. I don't think they lose it from the vast majority of people, but even losing 10% could be meaningful if you're looking at 1.1 million. And again, how many of those are upgrades? I couldn't tell you. How many of those are multiple account purchases? I couldn't even begin to guess. How many of those are trials? I don't know if trials are included in this number. But if you look at that, you can say that over this course of time, 8 years, that's not actually that much. This is, of course, just the worst kind of estimation that you could possibly do, but this does give us at least a ballpark to talk about. And 113,000 of units moved, whatever those units value are, is probably not enough throughout a year. Because if we divide that by 12 again, we get 11,475. Now, if you were to assume the top end, which let's just assume the top end, and let's say they're selling 129 is what it is here currently. They're selling $129. So times 129. That's $1.48 million. That is not real, by the way. That is definitely not the that is definitely just the highest it could possibly be. That is definitely not, in this estimation, even remotely close. That's still not enough for a headcount that is in the teens of software developers, because software developers make tremendous amounts of money and they are in high demand, and retaining that talent is not cheap. And you might look at $1.4 million a month and say, that's totally enough. But I guarantee you, it's way lower than that if we factor in everything that we said throughout this time period. Now, granted, they've gone on a hiring spree a little bit more. They brought on more talent. But even looking at those numbers during that time frame where they had maybe 6 to 8 employees, that's probably marginally enough. They are not making enough money. They are doing this change for a reason. They are not making enough money. They've said as much. They need to hire new talent. They need to keep a consistent stream of income. They're not interested in going the VC route. I think that is one of the things that I heard that made me feel good about this, is that they are not doing things to bring in VC funding. This is a family-based business. It's a dad and a daughter. Like, that's incredibly holistic, to be honest with you. That makes me feel good inside. And also at the same time, that gives them a lot of motivation to make a good product that people really like, that is community driven, like what we really do see. Yes, there are support issues. Yes, there are hard things to do. Yes, the user interface needs some updating. There are a lot of known issues, but the modernization of Unraid is something that has happened. It is still, in my estimation, the best fun route for people to go. However, depending upon what pricing comes out, we'll see whether or not that changes. Also, depending upon whether or not the user experience is good or not, we'll see if that changes. But being able to hire new talent, being able to recruit people and pay them out in the community for developing things like plugins and stuff like that is something they're interested in doing. They need cash flow to do that. And so running sales, bringing in users it's not infinite. There's a huge amount of users to bring in, but it is not infinite. Some other things that were brought up that I thought were really good is somebody talking about, how this impacts different people in different countries. And the price of a license in the United States, $129, $130. I mean, you go and see a movie with a family of 4, you're paying probably $120 by the time everybody's had dinner and got their tickets and played some video games. Like, it's going to add up to be pretty expensive. So it's not necessarily the same impact that it would be in a different country. That's one thing that I think is an interesting thing to consider. Let me know if that impacts you. They have started localizing so much of the interface, so much of the website, that I think there is a lot of people out there that they're bringing in from different areas, and certainly expanding their market reach is interesting. Would you feel good or bad if they gave a discount for a different region? I don't know how I would feel myself. I actually prefer it to just stay the same cost, because I think that makes it easy for them. And I think that disenfranchises fewer existing users. They have a hyper vocal base of users right now. I think overwhelmingly, let's say 9 out of 10 are going to be pretty positive about this. Based on what I'm reading, it's like 9 out of 10 that seem like they're good with it. They understand the motivation. The biggest sticking point that I continually see brought up is, will the software updates require a renewal? And per the interview, he did say yes, the software updates were one thing that would require a renewal. Could be wrong on that, but I think that is one thing that is not super popular, but it has to be that way also, because forcing people to renew once they have the product, if you're an Unraid user, once you have the product, you're probably okay not updating every single time. You probably don't want to update every single time in case something gets broken. So there is a lot of that at the same time that's going to happen as people just naturally come into the ecosystem, forget to renew, even though there is now a notification that lets you know that there is an update available that you can get in your browser when you visit your site. Will that become something that's mandatory as part of a messaging to increase monetization? And does that require a phone home? Those are good questions. And will there be a way to opt out of that? Because certainly I don't like phone home. We also, in the interview, got to hear them talking about the sharing through a network of your own people, kind of like you can do in Plex, but your Unraid shares. Love that idea. Absolutely love that idea. So you can encrypt a data set, back up your data on somebody else's stuff. If anybody has the backup capacity for several hundred terabytes, let me know in the comments below. And everybody, this is, I think, a big change. I'm very interested in what you think, how this is impacting you. I certainly know that Docker has quite a few things that go on, and the security around it needs to be updated on an ongoing basis. It shouldn't just be lax. And that's what powers the App Store. That's probably one of the reasons that Unraid's so popular, is they have a really great community apps that is not difficult for people to get into. That's hard to replicate that experience. I mean, it is literally one of the best out there. Doesn't overcomplicate it. Click, find thing you want, install. Usually you can just click through it, click the install, and you're good to go without even bothering with configuration. It makes it really easy for people. So there's also a danger that somebody buys a basic license, installs a bunch of stuff, and doesn't get notified of a critical update for security. So there is going to be something around that notification, how that happens, and that onboarding new sales for them. And I do hope that there is a checkbox somewhere where, for me with a pro license, I personally just go to the website, check, decide when I want to download something, and download it. That's the pathway that I go through. Let me know what your pathway is and if that's a big issue to you. But I hope this is a little bit more information than you might have. I think it's going to be challenging, though. Like, let me be frank. I don't think, had this been a subscription service, even back in 2016 or whenever it was that I first got into Unraid, I don't think that I would have been like, okay, let's do this. I think I would have been like, no. And I would have looked somewhere else. Let me know if you think that's going to be a problem as well. Everybody, have a great rest of your day. And this is interesting. What are the alternatives out there? We've got TrueNAS. TrueNAS is great for storage, for high performance storage. ZFS is going to require disk spinning. ZFS might not be exactly what you want to keep disk spinning in a higher electric area. There's other things also that are a little bit rough. I'm glad to see TrueNAS looking at moving away from K8s, like K3s, whatever. I'm glad to see them trying to get away from Kube and go more towards Docker. I think that's a good move for most people. I'm going to say that and get absolutely crucified, I have a feeling. But that is something that I think Unraid did and made it simple, and people liked it. And I think that's retail. However, of course, TrueNAS, a much different, much larger company than Unraid, and they have a lot of enterprise use cases and a lot of enterprise customers. Go look at TrueNAS's website. I mean, their employee base is huge, and they have customers that support that with support contracts, and that is something that they've done a really good job in business of. Unraid, at this moment, may be actually a little bit hurting for money to keep onboarding talent. And I hope that they can keep onboarding talent, because we definitely do need to see some changes to the Unraid interface. Having an API, one other thing that was talked about in the interview. Oh, we need that so that community developers can help out the interface, create things that are cool for Unraid, and do it without, breaking or shimming something in. That will be a major change. Of course, it is an operating system. That's what makes this magic so magical, is it is like an operating system. And in the past, running off a USB stick allowed you to have full utilization. Now, most people have an abundance of NVMe slots and other access. If you're going to be in a desktop class computer, this might be different. But if you are in like this, I stopped thinking about those kind of concerns quite some time ago. Let me know what your largest share size is. I will let you guys know what my largest share size is in an upcoming video. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe below and ring that bell. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys next time.